Welcome to the Massive Change Show. I'm Justin Foster.
And I'm Dr. Virginia Lacayo. In each episode, we have conversation with leaders who are getting in some good trouble by challenging paradigms and shaking the system.
And after each conversation, the episode shifts to the second show, where Virginia and I chat about what we learned from the guest.
If you know of any leaders who will make a great guest, please introduce us.
And of course, if you enjoy the show, please like, share, and leave a review.
Thanks for listening.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another special episode of the Massive Change Show. As we transition to season 2, we wanted to have some special episodes conversing with each other about some projects we're working on individually. I will say that stay tuned for season 2 because we've lined up some amazing guests, some real system shakers. So look forward to that. The last time we had a special episode a couple weeks ago, Virginia interviewed me about the new resistance roundtables. If you missed that episode, we'll link to it in the show notes. But today, I'm interviewing Virginia about a special offer that she has, a program that's called Shaking the System. And it's an executive briefing. And here's the kicker. It's free. It's free to certain organizations, which we're going to get into. And I want to tell you where this idea came from. So a few months ago, we were in Miami, and Virginia was asked to speak at a Morgan Stanley philanthropy conference. So this is all the philanthropic groups and foundations and stuff that Morgan Stanley supports. And Virginia was the ending keynote. And there were two moments from that event that we wanted to kind of spark this idea of creating this executive briefing. And one was at the beginning, and I have a picture of it, of some of the concerned hosts looking at Virginia's deck. You remember that? And going, oh, I don't know if you can say that. I always wonder, what would they say now? Because I think that was just after the election. But anyway, they didn't really make you edit much of anything. So props to them for that. But then you give your talk and you blow their minds. And there's this one lady, Cheryl, who at the end during Q&A, she stands up and she doesn't really address you. She tells the host, which is the head of Morgan Stanley Philanthropy, and then some of their strategic partners that were putting on the event. It's like, this should have been the starting keynote, and we shouldn't have anything else but Virginia talking about this because this is the most important thing we can work on.
It should not be a conference, but a workshop. That's what she said.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, this should have been, I would have spent 2 days on this topic.
Yeah.
So there's the setup for this. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm excited about this, and you have been part of just putting the idea together and say, what can we offer to respond to that demand and that request, saying, we need this kind of elevated thinking about, what we're doing, the context, our leadership, how we move on, considering that everything changed and we cannot just stay stuck. And that was it has been interesting to say how can we compact a lot of the things that we're doing in Massive in 1 hour, 1 hour and a half conversation that is an executive briefing, conversation with people that allows for them to take something away that is practical, that can be applied immediately, that is not just it's not a conference, it's not a webinar, it's not a keynote, and do it in a way that is valuable for them.
So let's start with the obvious. What is it and who's it for?
Okay, this is called Shaking the System Executive Briefing, and is for leadership teams and boards from nonprofit organizations, especially those that work on justice, environmental justice, democracy, human rights defenders, and so on. And the idea is to have a conversation. It's a very practical, down-to-earth, hands-on conversation about leadership, about power, about systemic change, what it takes, where we are right now, and what are the kind of things as organizations that keep us stuck in the past, in all models, organizational models, leadership models that don't allow us to move forward and actually adapt to the new context, to the complexities of the systemic issues that we have.
Can you talk a little bit more about that when you talk about leveraging complexity instead of shrinking from it in particular? What does that mean in this context of why someone would want you to come and talk to their leadership team?
Well, the complexity is something that we were raised, we were conditioned to be afraid of, and so we spend our life, and that's what MBAs and leadership books and models and everything that we have learned about leadership and about social change has been all about, and that comes from modern science and Newton, is about how can we collect enough data to be able to predict everything so we can control everything. And it might have worked centuries ago, but now things are way more complex. There are many elements, actors, factors, dimension on any of the social issues that we're addressing that are interacting with each other all the time and developing in very unpredictable, uncontrollable ways. So instead of staying stuck in that, let's say, obsession at some point, or and that blindness of, well, what we need is to plan better, more in detail, make the steps more specifics and try to control everything so we can bring about the change that we want. My invitation is to don't fight complexity, but embrace it, understand it, understand complexity, understand how complex issues happen and evolve, understand how complex systems work and change, and use that knowledge to find leverage points, to find the small things like the butterfly effects, the small thing that you can do that will create ripple effects, that how we lead in a complex environment that is not the same way we have learned how to lead before, or how we lead now. So it's embracing complexities, understanding how things actually are, how change actually happens, and use that to inform your leadership model and leadership style and leadership approach, your organizational model, and your strategies for sustainable change. And that will help us actually to get out of the reactive survival mode that we are right now, just chasing the wave and always feeling that we're always behind, how we get more funds, how we stay relevant, how we prove impact, how we, with the tools that we have, and get out of that and say, like, no, let's go ahead of the curve, ahead of the wave so we can surf it and learn how to deal with power, how to manage the different dynamics that are happening in the system, so we know where to focus our efforts. It's not about doing more, it's about doing it better and doing it more strategically.
So correct me if I'm wrong with this, because I'm asking this question and making this kind of observation through the mind of a straight white American male business person. But it's what I've learned from you in this process of developing, shaping the system, the playbook that you have, developing the keynote that you gave to the Morgan Stanley event, this executive briefing, which is different in the format. We'll talk about format in a minute, is because this second term of Trump and then the kind of a co-president and Musk, and what I call the three-headed monster of Christian nationalism, tech bros, and alpha bros, have created this moment, this oh shit moment for nonprofits, that it's not like in the United States in particular, probably around the world, but certainly in the United States, who has seen mostly a positive relationship with the federal government, even when there's been Republicans in office. George W. Bush was very much an advocate for the nonprofit model, as an example. And so this moment happened, and it's scary, and there's emotion around it, of course, that nonprofits are feeling, especially those, as you said, that are dealing with, democracy, human rights, environment, all the things that the kind of corporate feudalism of Trump Musk are, trying to tear down or reshape. I'm getting to a question, but I had to put the context in here. So this moment is like an oh shit moment, and you're saying that this is a moment for also upgrading your thinking as a nonprofit leader. Like, you can look at this moment and do the oh shit and hunker down and save your resources, or maybe be a little bit more silent, or you can step up and go, oh, I'm going to take advantage of this because it's directly related to our mission of our particular organization.
Yes.
Is that an accurate way to look at it?
Yes, it's like I'm the president of a large foundation as well, so I'm there. I know the feelings. I feel the anger, the frustration, the scare, the fear, the feeling of scarcity. I feel all those feelings as well. But from a scientist mindset, from when I put my scientist hat, I also understand that systems, and I'm talking about the big system, change in crisis. There is always a moment of crisis and chaos where we don't know, especially when it's a big systemic change that we haven't experienced before, like this one. We cannot predict, we cannot use past experiences, past changes to say, like, oh, well, it's going in this direction, it's going to behave this way, it's going to. We are in a moment where the best thing we can do is to really develop our capacity to identify patterns and say where this is going, how the system is behaving, what opportunities, what situations are closing down, and what doors are opening up right now, and how we take advantage of those opportunities. But it's not just about the system and say, okay, how I navigate, how I influence the direction the system is taking, because the system is changing no matter what. It's also saying that I'm part of the system, and if I don't adapt with the system, if I don't evolve with the system at its speed, then I'm gonna be left behind. And it's like saying, I want my marriage to improve, but I don't want to change anything. I want just the marriage to change. It's not marriage change when we both change something, when we both adapt to the vision that we have. So as nonprofit, this is a wake-up call first, saying, like, what led us here? What happened? What we were doing that didn't allow us to get the results that we wanted in the elections and this context right now? But also, what is the call for us? What this context is requesting, demanding from us to change, to evolve, so we are in condition to lead the system at its change, to lead, influence the direction of the system. So yes, it's a wake-up call and also an opportunity at the same time.
Right. Okay, cool. Phew, I was worried I didn't get it right. And so we talk a lot at Massive about, we use the term authoritarian as a more of a systemic term. And you have an excellent piece in your System Shakers Playbook newsletter, which I also linked to, about kind of a new definition of authoritarianism. And one of the things you point out in there is that authoritarianism has evolved. It's evolved. It's taken advantage of technology, and it's taking advantage of oligarchical structures. It's taken advantage of a lot of things. Yet nonprofits haven't necessarily evolved at a systemic level, which leads to kind of this question that I think is fundamental to what you're doing with the executive briefing, is that for years, because I've done a lot of workshops for nonprofits, there's kind of this thing of like, how do you do fundraising? How do you deal with burnout? How do you build a great team? you go to a nonprofit conference, you kind of see over the decades very similar workshops. But you're not doing that. You're not talking about anything tactical here per se, or skill building in the traditional sense. What you're doing with shaking the system with the executive briefing, and also your becoming Indomitable executive coaching and your intersectional leadership development program, is you are focusing on a mindset shift. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And the reason is because you can develop all the skills you want. You can read books, you can hire someone that train you, you can go to workshop. If your mindset is still in the old paradigm, and I'm gonna go back to this in a moment, but if your mindset is still in the old paradigm, if you still have the political culture, and I'm not talking political as partisan culture, but politicals as polis, the way we understand, and we have always understood what leadership is, what organizations are, how is the structure, how we command, how we lead, how we organize each other. If we are still stuck in that, that is very influential, and it's not our fault, it's not nonprofit's fault, but it's very influential by patriarchy, by supremacies, ideologies, by religious institutions, by exploitative capitalism. As nonprofit organizations, we have done the best we can to include, to expand and embrace diversity and inclusivity and belonging and non-discrimination and all that. But we have done all that within and in spite of the all structural organizational models that we have and the all leadership paradigms that we have, that we learn in most cases from the public sector and the corporate sector, and we just adopt them. And this is, I mean, we can go back to centuries where social science is trying to get legitimate as disciplines. We start copying methodologies and indicators from the hard sciences, from the math and economics and computers and all that, and just import them and just adopt them and try to adapt them to humans when we're not labs and we're not machines and we don't work in labs, right? We have been doing that for centuries. And so with our leadership models and organizational models, we're kind of doing the same thing. We have adopted a lot of the best practice from the corporate sector and the public sector that don't really respond to our needs and our vision of the kind of change that we want to promote. So we need to challenge that. And that starts with changing paradigms, changing mindset, changing the way we understand our organization, that we understand social mobilization, that we understand how social movements are built and strength and work and grow, how we understand leadership and the way we lead. So we start with that, and then we develop the skills. It's not either or, but developing the skills without a change in the mindset and the paradigm is just repeating the same patterns.
And it's fascinating, and it's something I've heard you say to me and to others is good intention doesn't change systems, or the right intention doesn't change systems. And so let's dig into, there's three mindsets that you talk about in the executive briefing, and essentially what you're doing in the executive briefing is, it's not really a lecture. There's sort of 10 or so minutes of a setup of context setting, and then you're going through these three kind of mindset shifts, and you're essentially helping them benchmark where they're at. Well, before that, I have a question before we get into the three mindsets is, who's going to resist this as a nonprofit leadership? Don't name names, but like the kind of person that when you say, basically, in my words, you need to upgrade your thinking if you're going to take on the current prevalent oppressive systems. Who's going to be repelled by that?
Well, probably a lot of people. Unfortunately, I mean, there are some organizations that actually are benefiting from the system. saying like, no, the way things are actually are in my favor. I'm getting benefits from that. So why change it? I don't want to change.
Hmm.
I don't want to change my relationship with the system and with the power structures. Others might be resistant because they are afraid, afraid that that changing your mindset and your paradigms is perceived as something painful and extremely radical and extremely difficult. I would
Hmm.
argue that it's not. I would say
Hmm.
that actually you change your paradigm not by sitting down and taking, getting a PhD on something, also that usually also works sometimes, but you change your paradigm by doing. You
Hmm.
start acting, and this is my approach at least. Instead of doing the gap, overcoming the gap by knowledge, then attitude, then practice, I start with practice. Let's do
Hmm.
things differently. Let's see what happens when we do it differently. Let's see the results and develop the our mind start getting like, oh, this is interesting. I want more of this. Now I'm more um, open and more welcome. I welcome more these kind of changes, and then I can teach you how I did it and all the theory behind it, and start working on that. But we start by, how about we took this, we changed this, we tried this, we experiment with this, which is um, very align with what complexity science is, the way that explain the way systems change. Systems
Hmm.
are built by chunks, but by experimenting, see what works, what doesn't work, fueling what works, stop doing, investing in what doesn't work. So it's like, yes, plan, have a vision, but don't get stuck to the papers. Like
Hmm.
lived in the system, live your change experience with, be present in the change process. And we do it
Right.
one by one. But that's another kind of people that and organizations that are either in the scarcity mode and they're really
Right.
stuck on that. And I will say those are the people that need the most this
Right.
kind of briefing and this kind of work. But is one of the reason why people might be is like, I'm already overwhelmed, I'm already
Hmm.
out, I'm already scared, I cannot deal with more changes, is when they have reached their emotional
Hmm.
capacity to deal with changes. Those are the people that will resist this, but those are the people that need it the most.
Right. Right.
That's
Right.
the purpose of this, is to get them out of that mentality.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah. I mean, authoritarian, whether it's modern authoritarianism with this group of chuckleheads that we have now doing it, or you go back, is they've always relied on people to have a sense of hopelessness about things. And I think what was fascinating
I'm just
in it,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. One more now that you mentioned authoritarianism. The third kind of people that will
oh,
resist this are people that are in leadership position and they are control freaks. I mean, the idea of
mm,
decentralizing control, decentralizing power, getting more into a ecosystem approach to leadership are the ones that might resist it, because it means in their mind, it's not true, but in their minds, it means to lose power and to give it away. For me, is to actually increase your power as understanding power as the capacity of making things happen, as the
mm,
capacity of influence the system. But when people understand power as the capacity to centralize decision making and control over processes, people, resource, etc., they might find resistance in doing, like, I don't want
mhm. Right.
things.
But to your point earlier, of those groups, there's the groups that are benefiting from the way things are, one way or the other. There's groups that are like, you're asking me to change my shoes, and I'm just running from the bear. And then there's groups that are like, there's a control aspect to it that is scary to them. The last two are just emotion. They're mindset things. So that matches. is you're not coming in saying, here's how to fight toe to toe with, the Heritage Foundation or something. Or the Trump administration. You're saying, for those of you that believe in what you're doing, but you need that's where the mindset shift comes in. So let's just go through, and I'm going to have you kind of rapid fire why you include this in each of these. Take two. Let's go through each of the three areas that you cover in the executive briefing, and I would love your kind of rapid fire response to why this is part of what you cover. The first one that you cover, or the first area that you cover in the executive briefing around these mindset shifts, is channeling emotions into actions, which is very similar to what we were saying about two of the three groups that we talked about. Why is that in there? Why is that important?
Channeling emotions into action, because as you said at the beginning, most nonprofit organizations, both their leadership and their staff and the groups and the volunteers and other communities, are freaking out right now, and without good reasons. Emotions like fear, like scarcity, like anxiety, uncertainty, anger, frustration are paralyzing emotions. The least what we need right now is to be paralyzed. We need to act. We need massive action. We need strategic action, not reactive action. That kind of emotions will leave you in reactive survival mode, or reactive aggressive mode, or completely paralyzed. Neither of those solutions will change anything. Actually, it will make things way worse. So, to really understand and have basic mind management tools to turn, it's not that you stop feeling them, but how we can feel that and use that as a fuel to clarify our mind, to have a clear vision, to develop a clear strategy, to open up to perspective, to see what I'm not seeing, and then act in a more strategic way, in a way that is also sustainable. Because also emotions are either fueling or draining energy, and you need all the energy you can accumulate for the long haul. So that's why it's important.
Okay, so follow-up questions to that. Let's pick an emotion that I think we often feel right now is outrage. And there's a kind of righteousness to it, but it's also exhausting. So if you're giving this executive briefing to a nonprofit, let's say that I'm part on the executive team, and I say to you, we all feel just outraged right now. And we feel like if we lose that emotion, we're going to lose our motivation to fight these assholes. How would you respond to that?
Well said. If the motivation is real, we're never gonna lose it. We didn't lose it before when we didn't feel that outrage, but we were always angry. The reason we're doing what we're doing is because we're not happy with the things, how the things are. So we were always angry, always frustrated, and always, there is a sense of indignation about this. That fuel or action before is not going to be different right now. The difference right now is the intensity of the emotion, to the point that it might take control over our mind and our behavior, is going to make us make mistakes.
Okay.
And we cannot afford that. So I can,
Cool.
and if we are in a session, I will go with you and show you how your outrage is actually taking actions and behaviors that are not serving you and your cause. And say, like, what if we reframe the outrage? We reframe it in a way that help you make better decisions and take more strategic actions. What will be the result?
Cool. So the second area is that you cover, and it's such a huge topic, so I'm curious about how you cover this in kind of an interactive executive briefing, is adopting a systems thinking approach. So rather than explain what systems thinking is, in this case, I think it would be great to say, How the hell do you tell them such a complex thing in a short amount of time? How do you share that with them where there's a takeaway from it?
Well, we do exercises. I mean, we I
Hmm.
most of the executive briefing is about presenting some prompts and questions and challenges and let's say exercises. Say, how about this? How you manage this? How would you react to this? What other options are? Is really thinking together out loud about their leadership model, about how they lead, the relationship with power, the relationship with the situation, the research that they already have, they haven't tapped into, and how they can get a better use of all that, but also restructure that in a way that get better results without the burnout and the overwhelming and even having needed more resources. It's kind of reorganizing your assets
Mm,
in many ways. I mean, all
interesting.
kind of assets. And so the systemic approach is very simple. Is acknowledging or stop denying that social change is a complex process,
Mm,
and to accept that no matter how much we plan, no matter how specific we are, no matter how much we want to control things, social change doesn't happen in a linear way where, like a log frame where I
hmm.
do A, then B happen, then C happen, and then we get to D. It's never like
Hmm.
that. No plan, no strategic plan has gone as planned ever.
Mm,
So the first step is to say, okay, this is complex. This is not
mm,
all controllable and predictable. So, what other ways are there to achieve the results we want by embracing the complexity instead of denying it and
mm.
pretending that it's not there?
This topic of systems thinking, what I'm hearing is something I've heard you say many times as well, is you can't solve complex systems with binary tools. And or solve is not the right word. It's not the word you use. You can't use binary tools on complex systems. So what you're saying is in that moment, it's kind of a bit of an epiphany. It was like, oh, we've been trying to apply these binary things to this adaptive monster that's happening right now, and that is its own aha moment that then begins a cascade of
Yes.
other things to be aware of, like root cause analysis and interconnectedness and pattern recognition. Like, is it possible even then to even adopt systems thinking if you don't have this first epiphany that you're talking about?
Yes.
Can you can still adopt it?
You can still try the tools and the approaches and notice the difference. And then
Okay.
ask yourself, it's like, what happened here?
Oh, I see. You sort of back into it. Okay.
Yes. But for me, I mean, this is what I say. It's not that everything you have to apply system thinking to everything. I mean, if you're trying to do a spreadsheet, don't apply system thinking to that. It's like use Excel, use
Yeah.
ChatGPT, use an
Yeah.
expert. So it's really about one of the first things that I teach is to identify people say like, okay, we deal with three kind of problems here every day, like personally and at the organizational level and the social level. We deal with simple problems, complicated problems, and complex problems. Simple problems and complicated problems, the question is, does somebody within the organization or somewhere in the world know or can know this answer? Have the expertise, have the knowledge, has the techniques, the skills, whatever that can answer this and solve this. If the answer is yes, don't make it more complicated than it is. Just find
Mm.
it. But if the
Okay.
question, and it happens with the main systemic issues that we have, does anybody in the world has the experience of solving and know how to do it and have a proven approach to solve poverty, to solve hunger, to
Hmm.
solve domestic violence, to solve
Yeah.
discrimination, racial discrimination, anything? The answer is no. So when we are
Mm.
facing to an unknown and unknowable solution, to a complex problem, then we need to change our approach. We need to stop thinking
Right.
that there are experts that will figure it out and
Right.
actually get more elements of the system together and say, like, how we figure this out. If it's a
Mm.
systemic problem, it needs a systemic solution.
Right. Great. So, and the third area is the first system you need to shake is your own within your organization. Why is that important? What's that look like in the context of the executive briefing and just the overall idea of shaking your system?
Well, there are two reasons for this. First one is alignment, and is just building the capacity and the skill of dealing with complex systems and leading complex systems. Um, how can I explain this in a simple way? If I want to, let's say, um, be a source of emotional support to others,
Mm-hmm.
I have to learn first how to manage my own emotions, how to stay calm in crisis, how to keep, like proactive, useful mindset, how to manage my mind, how to manage my emotions. It's the same thing. We want to change. We want a change in the world that cannot happen, and we will not lead people there if we are not putting it in practice first. I mean, Gandhi
Right.
said, be the change you want to see in the world. And so
Mm-hmm.
is that we have to acknowledge first, and a lot of these things, because of good intentions, because of good initiatives, are very hidden. We have in our leadership models and in our organizational models, we have hidden practices that are informed and permeated by oppressive behaviors and oppressive paradigms. I mean,
Mm.
in fact, just the pyramidal way of structure that we have in organization, where there is a top small group making all the decisions, centralizing the power, centralizing the resource,
Mm-hmm.
doing a top-down approach to leadership, where some people are invited and some other people are not invited to the table. How you decide who is invited, who's not, how you decide how you make decisions, what are the criteria that you use. I mean, everything is related to a bigger paradigm, a set of beliefs about how the world is and how it should be. And if we
Mm.
don't start by challenging those things and what I call decolonizing our individual and collective mind, then we're
Mm-hmm.
going to keep reproducing it. And we're going to reproduce inside of organization where we're fighting outside to change. So that is going to create conflict. And that is going to
Mm.
not allow us to see what possible solutions are out there. Our organization is our first lab to change.
Mm. Oh,
If
yeah, I like
we
that.
can create systemic change within that contained system, then we can propose systemic solutions for the bigger system as well. That's one of the
Okay.
reasons. And the other one is that if we don't lead our contained system, that is our organization, in a more systemic way, we're missing on a lot of resource that the system can provide to the solution.
Mm.
We're missing to tap into the collective intelligence and creativity of the system to solve complex problems. We as individuals, no matter how smart we are, no matter how qualified we are, our brain as humans is not capable of grasping the complexity of the social issues that we're facing. Systems can. We can
Mm-hmm.
as individuals, but systems can. So if we know how to lead a system into finding solutions that are complex, that are beyond our capacity to understand, the system will do what it does best, which is to evolve, which is solve complex problems. Most of the systems don't evolve fast enough and in a positive way because we humans get in the way of the system. Prevent
Yeah.
it from doing that work. So doing that work within your organization first is to liberating, is to unleashing the capacity of the organization to evolve and to solve complex problems for the organization. And from there, then go outwards, outside and start working on the change that you want to create at the higher systems, let's say.
Okay. So as we wrap up here, just a couple of other questions. So you're doing this for free, and there's some urgency. I know when you talk about it, there's urgency to it. Why are you doing it for free now?
Well, for two reasons. First, because it's my mission. I mean, this is what we live for. We live to help organizations to understand what it takes to lead systemic change. That is my personal mission and is our mission as in Massive. And it takes some effort, obviously, to sit with organizations. I want to do this with as many organizations as I'm humanly capable of doing, considering that I only have 24 hours like everybody else. But it doesn't take much to really, in 1 hour, it can be a life-changing, transformative experience for the organization. And if that can be my contribution, I'm so happy to do it, because I think that the only way to actually change things at the macro level is by doing it collectively. And the more organizations are in this paradigm, I mean, that understand how systems change and start behaving as system shakers, then the faster we're going to get where we want to get. And so this is my and Massive's contribution, but also because it's an introduction. I want to work with organizations that are willing to take this to deeper levels, that say, okay, this is an approach that might work for us, that we're ready for this, and we want to become system shakers, not just organizations that provide services that do good things for the community. It's actually, I want to shake the system. I want to change the system. And if the organization is ready and is willing to do that and is willing to invest in, in massive actions to take action on that, and they're open-minded and they want to learn and evolve, then I'm more than willing to start the conversation with them that way, and then keep the conversation to say, okay, what's next? What we need to do together to get you to that point.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot with something. If you could choose one organization, one nonprofit to deliver this executive briefing to, which one would it be?
Oh, man, that is putting me on the spot. I have to have a
or you could, maybe it's not the name of one, maybe it's a particular cause that you want, that you would love to particularly give this to, that's supporting a particular cause.
Okay, that's easier, because I had many names, but it was hard to choose.
That's okay. That's why I said put you on the spot.
I mean, right now, a large organization and maybe a federation or an association or a foundations that collect other organizations working on democracy. I think that's one of the first steps. I mean, human rights, democracy, human rights, women's rights, all the minorities' rights, migration, racial injustice, all that are related to our capacity to our democracy, to the capacity to have a strong democracy and participation and everything that involves, and freedom of speech and all that, and organization.
Okay.
So yeah, that will be
okay. Yeah. So the ask for the audience is, if you know nonprofit groups, especially bigger ones, as Virginia said, that are foundations that or associations that support other smaller nonprofits, please introduce them to Virginia. So that wraps this special episode of the Massive Change Show. All of the links are in the show notes, especially the link to apply. And even if you are not part of a nonprofit and you know of one that would benefit from this, that will be the link that you can use to send to other nonprofit groups. And stay tuned for season 2. Make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter. You can do that at massivechange.co. And if you're watching this or listening to this on Substack or Spotify, please leave a comment or review or share with a fellow agitator. Thank you very much.
Thank you.